The receipt trembled in my hand. The total staring back at me like a loaded gun, $8,300. I looked up, expecting an apology. Instead, my son smiled and grabbed his keys. "Mom, you pay." "We wait in the car," he said. He walked out, leaving me alone with a 25% tip added automatically, and the cold, sinking knowledge that my son had just declared war on me. My name is Margaret Holloway. At 58 years old, I have spent decades balancing ledgers and forecasting risks as a senior finance manager at Northbridge Freight Solutions here in Harborview, Oregon. I know how to spot a discrepancy in a spreadsheet from a mile away. Yet, sitting in the plush velvet booth of the Glass Harbor, surrounded by the clinking of crystal and the low hum of expensive conversation, I failed to see the red ink spilling all over my own life until it was too late. This was supposed to be a celebration, a belated birthday treat from my son, Ethan, his wife Brooke, and my 8-year-old grandson, Liam. The restaurant was the kind of place where the menu did not list prices, and the lighting was dim enough to hide sins. Ethan had insisted on ordering for the table. "You deserve the best. Mum," he had said, pouring me a glass of dark red wine that tasted like oak and blackberries. I watched as the waiter brought out tiered platters of imported shellfish, followed by Wagyu steaks that I knew cost at least $200 apiece. It felt excessive. I was a woman who packed a turkey sandwich for lunch every day. Yet here we were, drowning in opulence. Ethan and Brooke were not eating so much as performing. Brooke held her phone up, the ring light reflecting in her eyes, broadcasting our family dinner to her followers. Smile. "Margaret. Everyone loves a glam grandma." Brooke chirped, snapping a photo of me with a confused expression holding a forkful of lobster. Ethan was laughing, his face flushed. "Keep the wine coming," he told the waiter, waving a hand with a casual arrogance that made my stomach churn. As the dessert plate's elaborate sculptures of spun sugar and gold leaf were cleared away, the atmosphere shifted. Ethan checked his watch. He exchanged a look with Brooke that I could not quite decipher. "Well, that was amazing," Ethan said, standing up and patting his stomach. He looked down at me, his smile bright, but his eyes strangely flat. "Mum, we'll wait in the car. You just pay with your card. Okay, Liam's tired." Before I could process the request, he was ushering Brooke and a sleepy Liam toward the exit. "Just bring the receipt," he called back over his shoulder. I sat there, frozen. The waiter placed a leather folder on the table. I opened it. The number at the bottom made the breath catch in my throat. $8,342. My hands shook as I scanned the itemized list. The wine Ethan had been pouring so freely was a vintage bottle worth $3,000. There was a charge for a private dining experience I had never agreed to. There was an automatic 25% gratuity added for the party size. $8,000. I whispered to the empty room. I reached for my purse, my fingers numb. This was not just a rude gesture. This was theft. As I pulled out my credit card, my phone vibrated violently against the table. A notification from my bank lit up the screen. "Security alert, attempted transfer of $40,000 to unknown external account. Please confirm." The air in the room seemed to vanish. $40,000. That was not a dinner bill. That was a down payment. That was a chunk of my retirement. I stared at the screen. The transfer had been blocked, for now. But the attempt had been made at the exact moment Ethan knew I would be distracted by the bill. I handed my card to the waiter. I signed the receipt with a steady hand. Despite the ice spreading through my veins, I did not rush out to the car. Instead, I walked slowly to the glass doors and stopped in the shadows of the vestibule, looking out at the valet stand. Ethan was leaning against his SUV, the engine idling. He was not attending to his tired son. He was looking at his phone, the blue light illuminating a satisfied smirk. I stepped just close enough to the glass to see the screen he held at an angle. He was typing a reply to a message that had just come through. "She'll sign soon. Relax." I stood there in my sensible coat, clutching a receipt for an $8,000 dinner I did not want, realizing that the steak and the wine were just the appetizer. My son did not see a mother. He saw a bank vault with a faulty lock. And he had no idea that the woman he left to pay the bill was the same woman who had clawed her way up from nothing. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cold Oregon air. I would not ask him about the notification. Not yet. I would get in the car. I would smile. And I would watch him like a hawk. I followed Ethan's taillights through the rain-slicked streets of Harborview, keeping a safe distance between my sedan and his massive SUV. The silence in my car was heavy, a stark contrast to the performative chaos of the restaurant. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough to turn my knuckles white. As I watched his turn signal blink, my mind drifted back to the days when that car would have been a bicycle, and the man driving it was just a boy clinging to my leg at a funeral. When Daniel died in that construction accident, he left me with a mortgaged house, a toddler, and a life insurance policy that barely covered the funeral. I did not crumble. I could not afford to crumble. I worked shifts at the diner by day and took online finance courses by night, drinking stale coffee to keep my eyes open while Ethan slept in the next room. Every promotion I earned at Northbridge Freight Solutions, every dollar I put into my 401k, was a brick in the wall I built to keep us safe. I thought I was building it for both of us. I remembered the phone calls from his college years, the maxed-out credit cards he swore were for textbooks, the tuition loans he forgot to file. I always paid. I told myself that boys take longer to mature, that he would eventually find his footing. Then came the fight, 3 years ago. He had come to my house, eyes bright with a manic sort of enthusiasm, pitching a startup idea for transport technology run by a college friend. He wanted $100,000. When I refused, explaining the risk was too high, his face had twisted into something ugly. "You have the money sitting there," he had shouted, pacing my living room. You don't believe in me. You'd rather let it rot in a low-yield bond than help your own son build a legacy. It's selfish. Mom, that was the last time we spoke honestly. After that, our relationship became a series of polite, frosty holidays and brief text messages. Until tonight. I pulled into my driveway. The house dark and silent. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish and solitude. I tossed my keys on the counter and opened my laptop, the glow of the screen stinging my tired eyes. I needed to see the damage. I logged into my bank portal, intending to check the exact balance after that disastrous dinner transaction. That was when I saw the email. It was sitting in my spam folder, time-stamped 2 hours ago, right while we were eating appetizers. Subject action required. Authorized user request pending. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked it open. It was a notification from my brokerage firm. A request had been submitted to add a secondary authorized user with full trading privileges to my primary investment account. The status was pending signature. I scrolled down to see the applicant's details. Name, Ethan Daniel Holloway. But the contact email listed wasn't the personal Gmail address Ethan had used since high school. It was Admin Horizon Family Planning, COM. My stomach turned over. Ethan did not know how to fill out these forms correctly. I had handled his taxes for years because he found the paperwork too confusing. Someone else had filled this out. Someone professional. Someone who knew exactly which boxes to check to bypass the usual security questions. My phone buzzed on the granite countertop, making me jump. It was a text from Ethan. Mum, tomorrow can you swing by my office? I just need you to sign some paperwork about your 401k so I can help you manage it better. We're just worried about you. I stared at the words. We're just worried about you. Suddenly, the pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a physical blow. The exorbitant dinner, the $200 steaks, the bottle of wine, the casual way he had walked out and said, Mum, you pay? We wait in the car. It wasn't just entitlement. It was a stress test. He was testing my compliance. He wanted to see if I would absorb a financial blow without fighting back. He wanted to see if I was old enough, tired enough, or desperate enough for affection to just sign the check and keep my mouth shut. If I paid for the dinner without making a scene, I was prime real estate for the main event signing over control of my life savings. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. I had thought the dinner was an olive branch. I had thought my son wanted to see me. Instead, he was checking to see if the prey was limping. I did not reply to the text. I did not call him to scream about the unauthorized access attempt. In my 30 years of finance, I learned one thing above all else when you discover someone is cooking the books. You never let them know you are watching until you have the handcuffs ready. I closed the laptop slowly. You want to manage me? I whispered to the empty kitchen. I would go to his office tomorrow. I would play the part of the confused, aging mother. But I would not be signing anything. I was going to war. And my son had no idea he had just handed me the ammunition. The fluorescent lights of Northbridge Freight Solutions usually offered me a sense of order. But that morning, they felt harsh and exposing. I sat at my desk, staring at a logistics spreadsheet, but the numbers kept blurring into the image of that receipt from the glass harbor. Ava, a junior analyst with bright pink fingernails and a habit of oversharing, leaned against my cubicle wall, scrolling through her phone. It is honestly sick what people do, Ava said, shaking her head. My cousin just told me they are suing my uncle. Apparently, he got my grandpa to sign over the deed to his house last month. He told Grandpa it was just paperwork to avoid the nursing home tax. I stopped typing. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What happened? I asked. My voice tighter than I intended. Grandpa signed it. Ava sighed. He trusts family. Now the uncle is trying to sell the place out from under him. It is called financial elder abuse. The lawyer said it is practically an epidemic. Kids get impatient for their inheritance, so they just take it early. A cold shiver went down my spine, sharper than the office air conditioning. Kids get impatient. Before I could respond, my desk phone rang. The caller ID flashed Pacific Crest Savings. It was my primary bank. I picked up, grateful for the distraction, though my heart was already hammering a warning rhythm against my ribs. Mrs. Holloway. This is Laura from the downtown branch. The voice on the other end was professional but cautious. I am calling to verify the security questions for the co-signer application and the request to grant full online administrative rights to your son, Ethan Holloway. I gripped the receiver so hard the plastic creaked. I swiveled my chair away from Ava, lowering my voice. I did not submit an application for a co-signer. Laura, I said, keeping my tone deadly calm, and I certainly did not authorize full administrative rights. There was a pause on the line, followed by the sound of typing. That is strange, Laura said. We received a digital submission this morning. It includes a scanned copy of your driver's license and a durable power of attorney draft. Who submitted it? I asked. It came through a secure portal from a registered financial representative, Laura replied. Let me see. A Mr. Randall Pike. His credentials are listed under Horizon Family Planning, LLC. The name struck me with the force of a physical blow. Horizon Family Planning. Hold on 1 second. Laura. I put the phone on mute and grabbed my purse from the bottom drawer. My hands were shaking as I dug past my wallet and keys. I found it tucked in the side pocket, a glossy, trifold brochure Ethan had slipped into my bag the night before while we were walking out of the restaurant. Just look it over. Mum? They work with a lot of wealthy families in Harborview. I smoothed the crumpled paper on my desk. The logo was a stylized sun rising over a golden field. Horizon Family Planning, LLC, turning retirement into freedom. I unmuted the phone, cradling it between my ear and shoulder while I typed the company name into the search bar on my computer. Laura. I have never met a Randall Pike, I said, my eyes scanning the search results. The first few hits were generic corporate fluff, but then I scrolled down to the forums and legal databases. The headlines made my stomach drop. Class action lawsuit pending against Horizon Family Planning for predatory annuity sales. Consumer alert Horizon agents accused of churning accounts for elderly clients. Review. They promised to manage my dad's debt, but they just liquidated his 401k and took a 15% commission. This was not just Ethan being bad with money. This was not just a son asking for a loan. This was a system. Ethan had brought a wolf to my door and handed him the key. Mrs. Holloway. Are you still there? Laura asked. I am here, I said. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, stripped of all warmth. Laura, listen to me very carefully. Do not approve that request. Flag it as fraudulent. And I need you to do me a favor. Of course, Mrs. Holloway. Anything. I need to know exactly how deep this goes. I said. I need to see every attempted access, every inquiry, and every pending transfer on my accounts for the last 3 months. Can you pull those logs for me? I can, Laura said, her voice dropping to a whisper, as if she understood that this was no longer a standard banking matter. But I cannot email sensitive security logs. You would have to come in. I will be there at 5:15, I said. After the lobby closes, I do not want anyone to know I am looking. I understand, Laura said. I will have everything printed. I hung up the phone. On my screen, the Horizon Family Planning logo seemed to mock me. I looked over at Ava, who was still complaining about her uncle. She had no idea that 10 feet away. Her boss was staring into the exact same abyss. I folded the brochure carefully and put it back in my purse. I was not going to throw it away. It was evidence now. My son was not just a disappointed heir. He was a recruit in a conspiracy to dismantle my life. And he had underestimated the one thing that had kept me employed in this cutthroat industry for 30 years. I never sign a contract without reading the fine print. The bank branch was quiet, the heavy glass doors locked against the evening rush. Laura sat across from me in a small cubicle, a thick stack of printer paper between us. She looked pale, her fingers drumming nervously on the desk before she pushed the pile toward me. "I should not be showing you raw logs like this," Laura said softly. "But you need to see the timeline." I flipped through the pages. It was a forensic map of betrayal. There were dozens of login attempts from an IP address I did not recognize, starting 3 weeks ago. Then came the applications, a request to increase the limit on my visa, a setup for a recurring monthly transfer of $2,000 to an external account labeled consulting fees. But the document that made my blood run cold was near the bottom. It was a draft application for a home equity line of credit. The amount requested was $350,000. "They want to borrow against my house," I said, my voice flat. "Not just borrow." Laura pointed to a section highlighted in yellow. "Look at the notification clause. The funds are set to be disbursed to a joint holding account, with Ethan Holloway and Horizon Family Planning LLC listed as the primary authorized parties for withdrawal. It is currently pending because it requires a wet signature, your signature, in the presence of a notary." I stared at the number. $350,000. That was nearly 80% of the equity I had built up over 30 years. It was not a loan. It was an eviction notice waiting to happen. "I had a client last year," Laura said, her voice trembling slightly. "Mrs. Gable, 70 years old. Her nephew convinced her to sign a similar line of credit. Said it was for home improvements so she could sell the place for more money. He drained the account in 2 weeks and vanished. She lost the house. She lives in a state-subsidized facility now." Laura looked me in the eye. "Do not let that happen to you." She scribbled a name and address on the back of her business card. "Go see him. Tonight if you can. He is the only one I trust with this kind of mess." The name read Thomas Riker. Riker and Hale Elder Law. 30 minutes later, I was walking into an old red brick building in downtown Harborview. The office of Riker and Hale smelled of old paper and stale coffee. Thomas Riker was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and left out in the rain too long. He was 62, with steel-grey hair and eyes that had seen every possible variation of human greed during his time as a state prosecutor. He did not offer me tea or sympathy. He just took the stack of bank logs and the Horizon brochure, put on his reading glasses, and read in silence. The only sound in the room was the ticking of a grandfather clock and the rustle of paper. Finally, he took off his glasses and looked at me. "It is a classic play," Tom said, his voice gravelly. "We call it the financial guardianship trap. They do not steal your money outright at first. They get you to sign a durable power of attorney and a home equity line. They frame it as protection or management. Once they have the legal authority, they liquidate the assets into accounts they control. By the time you realize the money is gone, you are legally broke, and they have a piece of paper saying you authorized it all." But I hesitated, the mother in me still trying to find a loophole in the logic. "Ethan isn't. He's not a criminal. Maybe he is being manipulated by this Pike character. Ethan just wants to help. He told me he was worried about me." Tom leaned forward, clasping his hands on the desk. "Mrs. Holloway, let's look at the facts. Someone tried to test transfer $40,000 during your dinner. Someone drafted a loan against your house for $350,000. You do not accidentally set up a shell company beneficiary. You do not accidentally try to bypass bank security." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy between us. "If you sign those papers tomorrow, Tom continued. Your son and his advisor will have the legal right to strip you of everything you own, and they will put you in a budget nursing home with the change. The brutality of his words cut through my denial. I sat back, the leather chair creaking. So, what do? I asked. Do I cancel the meeting? Tom said sharply. A predatory glint appeared in his eyes. If you cancel, they will know you are onto them. They will panic and try to hack the accounts or forge your signature before you can lock them out. We need to buy time. He pulled a yellow legal pad toward him. You are going to keep that appointment. You are going to play the confused, overwhelmed mother. While you are stalling, we are going to do 3 things. First, you are going to see a doctor tomorrow morning for a full cognitive evaluation to prove you are sane. Second, we are going to move your house and your savings into a revocable living trust with a trustee that isn't your son. And third, Tom looked at me, his expression grim. You need to start recording everything. If they want to play games with your life, let's make sure we have the tapes for the jury. The air inside Harborview Medical Center was cool and smelled faintly of rubbing alcohol and floor wax. I sat on the crinkly paper of the exam table, watching Dr. Elaine Porter shine a light into my eyes. I had spent the last 3 hours undergoing a battery of tests that felt less like a checkup and more like an interrogation of my own mind. Memory recall, puzzle solving, spatial reasoning. I attacked every test with the same ferocity I used to audit shipping manifests. Well, Margaret, Dr. Porter said, clicking her pen and looking at her clipboard. If you were looking for an excuse to retire early based on cognitive decline, I have bad news. Your processing speed and memory recall are in the 95th percentile for your age group. You are sharp as a tack. I need you to write that down. Elaine, I said, my voice steady. I need a formal medical statement asserting that I show absolutely no signs of dementia, depression, or incapacity. I need you to write that I am fully competent to make complex financial and legal decisions. Doctor. Porter paused, peering at me over her glasses. Is everything all right? Margaret. I am just getting my affairs in order. I replied, strictly precautionary. An hour later, I was back in Thomas Riker's office. Sitting in the leather chair opposite Tom was a woman who looked like she could stare down a freight train. Selina Moore was 45, with short, cropped hair and a leather jacket that creaked when she moved. She did not waste time with pleasantries. She slid a tablet across the desk toward me. Your boy is sloppy, Selina said, her voice raspy. He meets his co-conspirator in public places. This was taken yesterday at a coffee shop on 4th Street. I looked at the screen. The photo showed Ethan sitting across from a man in an ill-fitting grey suit. The man had slicked back hair and the sweaty desperation of a low-rent salesman. That is Randall Pike, Selina explained. He runs Horizon Family Planning out of a shared workspace. He was investigated for insurance fraud 5 years ago, but skated on a technicality. He targets families with assets and heirs who have debt problems. She tapped the screen to play an audio file. I managed to get a directional mic on them for about 2 minutes. Listen. The audio was grainy, surrounded by the clatter of cups, but Ethan's voice cut through the noise. I just need her to sign the line of credit, Ethan said. She's stubborn, but she trusts me. Then came the voice of Randall Pike, smooth and oily. Once your mum signs the line of credit and the durable power of attorney, we can move, pay off your debts, and still leave enough to take care of her in a nice facility. Win-win. I felt the blood drain from my face. A nice facility. Win-win. My son was discussing my institutionalization as a business strategy to clear his gambling or business debts. The last shred of hope I had been holding on to, that perhaps he was just misguided, evaporated. "He is going to sell me out," I whispered. Tom leaned forward. "Not if we move first." We spent the next 2 hours drafting the documents for the Holloway Living Trust. With the medical report from Dr. Porter attached as proof of my competency, I signed over the deed to my house and the bulk of my investment accounts into the trust. I named myself as the trustee for now, but the successor trustee was not Ethan. It was a charitable foundation for underprivileged children I had always planned to start. "And the rest?" Tom asked, pointing to the secondary clause. "To Liam," I said firmly, "held in trust until he is 25. Ethan gets nothing. Not a cent. Not a single share of stock." The notary stamped the final page with a heavy thud that sounded like a gavel. It was done. Ethan could get me to sign 10 different power of attorney forms tomorrow, and it would not matter because I no longer legally owned the assets he was trying to steal. The trust owned them. That evening, I sat in my living room, the house dark except for the streetlights filtering through the blinds. My phone rang. It was Ethan. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice sounding forcedly cheerful. "Just checking in about tomorrow. You are still coming by the office to sign those investment papers." "Right. I really think this will help you relax." I took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of pain into a performance. "Oh, Ethan." I let my voice trail off, sounding weary and confused. "Yes. I suppose so. I have been feeling so overwhelmed lately. The numbers just seem to swim in my head." "That is exactly why I want to help," Ethan said, the relief audible in his voice. "Don't worry about reading everything. Mum, Randall and I have it all ready. You just need to bring your ID." "Okay. Honey," I said softly, "I will see you tomorrow." I hung up the phone and stared at the dark screen. He thought he was leading a lamb to the slaughter. He had no idea he was inviting a wolf into his den. The office of Horizon Family Planning was not the corner suite in a glass tower that the brochure implied. It was a windowless conference room in a shared workspace building next to a discount tire store, smelling faintly of stale coffee and dry erase markers. Ethan, Brooke, and Randall Pike sat on one side of the laminate table, forming a united front of smiling predation. Randall clicked a remote, and a slide titled "Smart Retirement Security Through Delegation" projected onto the wall. He wore a suit that was slightly too shiny under the fluorescent lights, and his teeth were whitened to an unnatural shade of porcelain. "Margaret, the statistics are terrifying," Randall said, his voice dropping to a practiced register of concern. 70% of seniors lose their savings to fraud or mismanagement when they try to handle it alone. We need to insulate you. We need to put a firewall between you and the stress of the market. A young, dynamic custodian like Ethan is the perfect solution." Brooke reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her palm was damp. "We're just worried about you." "Mom," Brooke said, her eyes wide and pleading. "We just want you to be able to relax and enjoy your life without worrying about bills." Randall slid a heavy stack of documents toward me. I looked down at the titles: Durable Power of Attorney, Healthcare Proxy, Change of Beneficiary Form, and the centerpiece Home Equity Line of Credit application. They had not even tried to hide it. If I signed these, I would be handing them the keys to my house and the password to my bank accounts. I would effectively cease to be a person with rights and become a dependent ward of my own son. I reached for my reading glasses, making a show of fumbling with the case. In my purse, the small recording device Selina had given me was humming silently, capturing every word. It just seems so complicated, I said, letting my voice waver. Why do I need a loan on the house? I thought the house was paid off. Randall smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It is not a loan in the traditional sense. Margaret, it is liquidity. We unlock the dead equity in your home to invest in high-yield opportunities. It is about making your money work for you. I turned a page, feigning confusion. But this says, authorized user Ethan Holloway with full withdrawal rights. Does that mean Ethan can take the money out whenever he wants? Ethan shifted in his chair. He looked agitated. He kept checking his watch, as if he had a deadline I did not know about. Mom, can you just sign Randall already explained? Ethan snapped, his patience fraying. This way, we can take care of everything. You don't have to think. Like last night at the restaurant. You pay. We handle the rest. Okay. The room went silent. The echo of his words hung in the air like smoke. You pay. We handle the rest. I looked up slowly, staring straight into my son's eyes. I dropped the confused old lady act for just a fraction of a second. You really like letting me pay for everything, don't you? I asked softly. Ethan blinked, looking momentarily confused by the sharpness in my tone. That's not what I meant. I just meant we want to make it easy for you. I need to use the restroom, I said, standing up abruptly. All this coffee. Before they could object. I walked out of the conference room and down the hall to the communal bathroom. I locked the stall door and pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling. Not from age, but from a rage so cold it burned. I sent a single text message to Thomas Riker. Ready? They're pushing me. I waited 10 seconds. Then I flushed the toilet for appearances, washed my hands, and walked back into the lion's den. When I sat back down, the atmosphere had shifted. They were leaning forward, pens poised, expecting capitulation. Okay, I said, placing my hand on the stack of papers. I think I understand the plan. Randall uncapped a pen and held it out to me. Excellent decision. Margaret, sign right here. And here. I pushed the pen away, but I never sign anything without reading it in full. I said, my voice gathering strength. I am going to take these home. I will read them over the weekend and let you know on Monday. The colour drained from Ethan's face. He stood up, knocking his chair back. Mom? No, he shouted, his voice cracking. We booked everything. Randall set up the line of credit. If you don't sign this week, we can't fix your finances. The rates will change. It is just 2 days. Ethan, I said calmly. Mrs. Holloway, I really must insist. Randall began, his smooth demeanour cracking to reveal the panic underneath. The market is very volatile right now. Delaying could cost you thousands. Suddenly, Randall's phone rang. He frowned, looking at the screen. It was a local number. He held up a finger to silence us and answered. This is Randall. Yes. Speaking. I watched his face closely. Within seconds, the fake tan seemed to drain away, leaving him grey and sweaty. What do you mean the account is flagged? Randall hissed into the phone. Who put a freeze on the assets? A trust. What trust? He looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock. He was not talking to a bank. He was talking to someone from Riker and Hale who was impersonating a compliance officer, informing him that the assets he was trying to steal had just been moved into the Holloway Living Trust 10 minutes ago. Randall hung up the phone. His hand was shaking. He looked at Ethan, then at me, realizing suddenly that the sheep had teeth. "Is there a problem, Mr. Pike?" I asked innocently. We seem to have a technical issue with the bank." Randall stammered. He began gathering his papers, no longer caring about the signature. "I will take these copies," I said, snatching the unsigned documents from the table before he could take them back. "For my review?" I stood up and walked toward the door. I did not look back at Brooke, who was chewing her lip nervously. I did not look at Randall. But I paused at the door and looked at my son. Ethan looked devastated, not because he had almost hurt his mother, but because his payday had just walked out the door. "Goodbye, Ethan," I said. I walked out into the cool air of the parking lot, clutching the evidence of their betrayal to my chest. I had won the skirmish. I had the recordings. I had the documents. But as I sat in my car and locked the doors, the victory tasted like ash. I had saved my money, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had lost my son. The courier arrived on a Tuesday morning. The heavy envelope from the Harbour County Superior Court felt like a brick in my hands. I tore it open at the kitchen table, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Petition for appointment of financial conservator. Petitioner Ethan Daniel Holloway. Respondent Margaret Ann Holloway. The allegations inside made my breath hitch. They claimed I was demonstrating advanced cognitive decline, erratic spending habits, and endangering the family estate. There were sworn statements from people I barely knew, a neighbour claiming they saw me wandering the street at 3 a.m, a fabricated utility company notice about unpaid bills. I drove straight to the law offices of Riker and Hale. Tom read the petition with a weary expression, tossing the file onto his desk as if it were contaminated. "This is the standard playbook," Tom said. "They try to hit you fast, get an emergency temporary order, and freeze your assets before you can fight back. They want to paint you as a confused old woman who needs a guardian to survive." "They are lying," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "I have never missed a bill in my life, and I certainly do not wander the streets at night." "We know that," Tom replied, his eyes sharp. "And unlike them, we have proof. They do not know about the trust. They do not know about Dr. Porter. They are walking into a buzzsaw." The door opened, and Selina walked in, guiding a frail woman in a faded floral dress. "Margaret, this is Rose Miller," Selina said gently. "She used to have a retirement fund. Then she met Randall Pike." Rose looked at me with watery eyes, her hands clutching a worn handbag. "He told me he would double my money," she whispered. "He had me sign papers I did not understand. Now I live in a mobile home park outside the city. I will not let him do it to you." The hearing was 3 days later. Judge Angela Cortez presided. She was a stern woman of 55 with a reputation for shredding frivolous lawsuits. The courtroom was small, smelling of lemon polish and anxiety. Ethan sat at the plaintiff's table, refusing to look at me. Randall Pike was there too, looking smug next to a lawyer in an expensive suit. Randall's lawyer stood up first. He painted a picture of a tragic decline, using a tone of fake sympathy that made my skin crawl. "Your Honor, Mrs. Holloway is a danger to her own future," he intoned. "Just last week, she spent over $8,000 on a single dinner. She ordered rare wines she could not name and food she barely ate. This is classic impulsive spending associated with early-stage dementia. I felt a flash of heat. They were using the dinner, the trap they set, as proof of my incompetence. Tom stood up slowly. "Your Honor, regarding that dinner?" he said, his voice calm. "We have the receipt, time-stamped. We also have the testimony of the server, who confirms that Mr. Ethan Holloway ordered the wine, the steaks, and the private room. He and his wife then left the premises before the bill arrived, leaving his mother to pay." Judge Cortez raised an eyebrow, looking down at the defense table. "Is this true, Mr. Holloway?" Ethan shifted in his seat, his face turning a blotchy red. We had to get the baby home," Mom offered. "And the wandering at night," Tom continued, ignoring Ethan. "We have security camera footage from Mrs. Holloway's home system for the past 3 months. She has not left her house after 10 at night once. The affidavit provided by the plaintiff is perjury." Then Tom played the ace. "But the real motivation here is not concern, Your Honor. It is theft. I would like to submit Exhibit C, an audio recording taken in the offices of Horizon Family Planning." The courtroom went silent as the tape played. Randall's voice echoed from the speakers, tinny but clear. "Once your mum signs, we can move, pay off your debts, and still leave enough to take care of her in a nice facility. Win-win." Ethan sank low in his chair. Randall Pike stopped smiling, his face draining of colour. Dr. Elaine Porter took the stand next, stating clearly that my cognitive functions were exceptional. Then Rose Miller took the stand, her voice shaking as she pointed a finger at Randall Pike and described exactly how he had liquidated her savings under the guise of protection. Finally, Laura from the bank testified about the unauthorized attempts to open a line of credit using a fraudulent application. Judge Cortez listened to it all, her expression hardening like drying cement. She looked over her glasses at Ethan and Randall. "Mr. Holloway," the judge said, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. "You have brought a petition to this court claiming your mother is unfit. The only thing proven here today is your own moral bankruptcy." She slammed her gavel. "The petition for conservatorship is denied with prejudice. Furthermore, based on the testimony of Mrs. Miller and the evidence presented regarding the unauthorized credit applications, I am referring Mr. Randall Pike and Horizon Family Planning to the District Attorney's Office for immediate investigation into fraud and elder abuse." I looked at Ethan. He was not looking at me. He was staring at the table, realizing that the hole he had dug for me was deep enough to bury him too. The article in the Harborview Chronicle ran on page 3 under the headline, "Local Family Targeted in Financial Guardianship Scheme." It did not print our names, but in a town of 20,000 people, it did not have to. Everyone knew who the prominent logistics manager and her local car salesman's son were. The story, fed by the court filings, spread through the community like a virus. I heard about the scene at Harborview Auto Plaza from a friend who was getting her oil changed. Apparently, the whispers followed Ethan across the showroom floor. When he tried to approach a couple looking at a sedan, they abruptly walked away. Later that afternoon, his manager called him into the glass-walled office that overlooked the lot. "We sell trust here." "Ethan," the manager had said, loud enough for the receptionists to hear. "And right now, you are a reputation risk. You are on probation. One more headline, and you are done." The fallout did not stop at the dealership. Brooke, who had spent years curating her life as a perfect suburban mother online, watched her digital empire crumble in real time. I checked her page one evening and saw the comments flooding in. Brands that had sent her free diaper bags and organic snacks were quietly removing her tags from their posts. One comment stood out, written by a user named Justice for Mom. How can you post about family values when your husband tried to steal from his mum? Unfollowed. While my family was being tried in the court of public opinion, the real law was closing in on Randall Pike. Selena had handed her dossier to a financial investigative journalist. The resulting exposé triggered an immediate freeze on Horizon Family Planning's accounts by the state regulatory board. Randall was summoned for questioning, and a class action lawsuit began to form as other victims, emboldened by my victory in court, stepped forward. Then came the financial autopsy of my son. With the spotlight on him, his creditors started calling. It turned out the $40,000 he tried to transfer from me was just the tip of the iceberg. Ethan had maxed out credit cards, a truck loan he was underwater on, and significant online gambling debts. He was teetering on the edge of personal bankruptcy. On the surface, I went about my life. I went to work at Northbridge. I watered my hydrangeas. I helped Liam with his math homework. On the afternoons, Brooke dropped him off, desperate for free childcare while she tried to salvage her image. But inside, I felt a hollow, cold wind blowing through my chest. There was no joy in this victory. One rainy Tuesday, Brooke showed up at my door. She looked haggard, her roots showing, her designer coat dampened by the drizzle. She stood in my entryway and broke down. I didn't know it would go this far. Brooke sobbed, clutching a tissue. Randall said it was just paperwork. Ethan said you'd be better off in a community. We were drowning. Margaret. We just thought, if you weren't using the money. I looked at her, seeing the pathetic truth. She was both a conspirator and a fool, blinded by her desire to maintain a lifestyle she could not afford. You thought my money was just sitting there waiting for you to rescue it? I asked coldly. We were going to pay it back, she insisted, her voice rising to a whine. Eventually, I sent her home, but the knife twisted deeper the next day. Liam was sitting at my kitchen table, eating a slice of apple pie. He swung his legs back and forth, looking at me with innocent eyes. Grandma, he said between bites. Dad says when you get old, money should go to people who can actually enjoy it. That's why he's mad at the judge. I froze, the pie server in my hand. My son had not only tried to rob me, he had dehumanized me to his own child. He saw me as an expired asset, an obstacle between him and the fun he thought he deserved. That was the moment the last ember of maternal hesitation died. I went to Tom Riker's office the next morning. The rain lashed against the brick walls of the old building. They are drowning. Margaret, Tom said, looking over the file of Ethan's debts. Bankruptcy is inevitable for them. We could just walk away. No, I said. The word tasted like iron. If I walk away, they will find another way to cheat someone else. Or they will wait for me to die and hope for a scrap. I need to close the door. Tom nodded slowly. We can file a civil suit for attempted financial exploitation and emotional distress. We can go after the remaining assets they have. We can ensure that any future wages are garnished to pay punitive damages. Do it, I said. It will ruin him. Margaret. Tom warned softly. He will never financially recover from this. I thought of Liam's voice repeating his father's words. I thought of the nice facility Randall had promised. He tried to ruin me first. I replied, "File the suit." The seasons changed outside my window, turning from the grey drizzle of autumn to the stark, biting cold of winter. But inside the courtroom, time seemed to stand still. The civil suit had morphed into a juggernaut. The judge had accepted the preliminary motion for damages, finding sufficient cause to proceed. Randall Pike's assets were frozen solid, and Ethan was no longer just a witness or a victim of bad advice. He was a named co-defendant. The potential judgment hung over his head like a guillotine, $400,000 in punitive and compensatory damages. My son's life was dismantling itself piece by piece. Harborview Auto Plaza let him go 2 weeks after the hearing. They claimed it was a restructuring, but everyone knew the truth. They could not have a man accused of financial elder abuse selling trust on their showroom floor. Now, I sometimes saw him in traffic, driving a beat-up sedan with a glowing food delivery sign on the dashboard. He looked grey and exhausted, running pizzas for tips to pay off the interest on debts that never seemed to shrink. The family unit, fragile as it was, finally shattered. Brooke did what survivors do. She cut the dead weight. She filed for divorce and moved back to her parents' house in the suburbs of Portland, taking Liam with her. Because of Ethan's precarious financial situation and the looming lawsuit, the family court granted her primary custody. Ethan was reduced to a weekend father, a visitor in his own son's life, allowed to see Liam only on alternating Saturdays and never overnight. Liam remained the only bright spot in my universe. But even he cast long shadows now. On the rare occasions we spoke on the phone, his voice was small, stripped of its usual childish exuberance. "Grandma, why is Dad so sad?" he asked one evening. The question felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I gripped the phone, unable to answer. I had protected my assets, yes. I had secured my future. But in doing so, I had broken his father. The nights were the hardest. I sat in my living room, the silence of the house pressing against my eardrums. On my lap sat an old shoebox of photographs. I flipped through them slowly. There was Ethan at 6 years old, smiling with a gap-toothed grin next to his first bicycle. There he was, camping with Daniel, roasting marshmallows, his face illuminated by the firelight and pure adoration for his father. I tried to reconcile that boy with the man I saw in court, the man with the hollow eyes who refused to look at me, the man who had plotted to put me away so he could pay off a gambling debt. Gerald, my neighbour, stopped by on a Tuesday. He was 70 years old, a retired police officer who had seen enough vengeance to know how bitter the aftertaste could be. He brought a blueberry pie and sat on my porch, watching the rain. "Margaret," he said, his voice gravelly and low. "Are you sure you want to crush him until he can't get up? You have the trust. You have the house. He is already down." I stiffened, my defences rising like a wall. He wanted to destroy me first. I snapped. He didn't care if I ended up in a state facility sleeping on a cot. Why should I care if he goes bankrupt? Gerald just nodded, set his coffee cup down, and stood up to leave. Justice is a fine thing. Margaret, just make sure it keeps you warm at night. When the door clicked shut, the anger evaporated, leaving only a terrible, aching cold. I sat there and wept, not for myself, but because I could no longer tell the difference between protecting myself and destroying my own flesh and blood. Late that night, my phone rang. It was Brooke. Her voice was hoarse, as if she'd been crying. Liam keeps asking why Grandpa isn't coming to his birthday. She stammered, and he asks about Ethan. I don't know what to tell him. Margaret, I don't know how to answer him without making his father look like a monster. I closed my eyes. Liam was paying the price for the sins of the adults. He was the collateral damage in a war he did not understand. The next morning, an email arrived from Tom Riker. He was confident. He outlined the strategy for the final hearing, predicting a total victory that would garnish Ethan's wages for the next 20 years. But at the bottom, he had added a personal note. You have the right to pursue this to the end. Margaret, the law is on your side, but you should ask yourself what you want the rest of your life to revolve around: the money, the win, or some kind of peace. I sat in my study, the glow of the monitor illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. On my desk lay the draft for the Daniel Holloway Scholarship, the certified trust documents, and the lawsuit against Ethan. I had won. I was the victor. But as I looked at the empty armchair by the window where Daniel used to sit, I realized that if I continued down this path, I would have nothing left but a bank balance and a silence so loud it would deafen me. Desperation makes people do ugly things, but I never thought my son would stoop to suing his own victim. A week before the final hearing, Ethan hired a strip mall lawyer and filed a countersuit against me for defamation and abuse of process, claiming I was using the legal system to ruin his reputation. He demanded $200,000 in damages. Tom Riker laughed when he read the filing. They are throwing stones at a tank. Margaret, he said, tossing the papers onto his desk. It is a Hail Mary pass. They know they are going to lose. I did not laugh. Seeing Ethan Holloway versus Margaret Holloway on official court stationery felt like something inside me broke all over again. The trial was a spectacle. Randall Pike was absent, having been indicted on criminal fraud charges earlier that week. So Ethan sat alone at the defense table. The local press filled the back row. Ethan's lawyer tried to paint a sympathetic picture, arguing that Ethan was a panicked son who sought professional help because he genuinely feared I was losing my grip on reality. He made a mistake, the lawyer argued, sweating under the glare of the courtroom lights. But it was a mistake born of love and concern. Tom stood up for his rebuttal. He did not shout. He simply walked to the podium and projected an email onto the screen, a message Selena had recovered from a backup server just 2 days prior. It was time-stamped 30 minutes after we left the restaurant that night. Subject: dinner. From Ethan Holloway to Randall Pike. Body: she swallowed the bill without a word. Once she signs the house papers, we're clear. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Ethan buried his face in his hands. Judge Cortez looked at the screen, then at Ethan. Her expression was one of pure disgust. This is not love, counselor, Judge Cortez said, her voice icy. This is a case study in predation. You turned your mother into a natural resource to be mined. The gavel fell like a hammer blow. The court ruled in my favor on all counts. Ethan and Randall were found jointly liable for attempted financial exploitation and were ordered to pay $450,000 in damages. Furthermore, the judge ordered Ethan's name to be added to the state's elder abuse registry, effectively ending any chance he had of working in finance or sales ever again. Then, the room went quiet. Judge Cortez looked down at me. Mrs. Holloway, she said softly, given the severity of the betrayal, would you like to request a permanent restraining order against your son? I looked across the aisle. Ethan was not the arrogant man who had ordered $200 steaks. He was slumped over, his eyes hollow. looking at the floor as if he wished it would open up and swallow him. He was a man standing in the ruins of a house he had burned down himself. I thought of Liam's voice on the phone. "Why is Dad so sad? No." "Your Honour," I said slowly, "I do not ask for a reduction in damages. The consequences are his to bear. But I do not want a restraining order. I want the law to punish him. But I do not want to close the door on the possibility that he might, one day, become a better human being for the sake of my grandson." The courtroom emptied out, leaving us in the echoing hallway. I stopped Ethan as he was walking toward the exit. He flinched when he saw me. I handed him a folder. "What is this?" he asked, his voice raspy. "A settlement agreement," I said. "I am not letting you off the hook." "Ethan, you will pay, but the terms are different. You will pay me $50,000 over the next 10 years. The rest of the judgment, I am deferring it. If you make your payments, the remaining balance will be transferred directly into the Daniel Holloway Scholarship Fund and a trust for Liam. It will never touch my pocket." Ethan stared at me, tears welling in his red-rimmed eyes. "Mum." "Why?" "Because I do not want my money to be the chains that bind you for the rest of your life," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "You have a debt to pay. But when it is paid, I want that money to go up, to the next generation, not down into a hole. As for you and me, we have a different war to fight, not in court, but in how we choose to live from here on out." 6 months later, the autumn leaves were turning gold again. I picked Liam up for the weekend. We stood in the parking lot of the grocery store, the wind biting at our cheeks. "Grandma, can we eat out today?" Liam asked, looking up at me with his bright eyes. "I can help you pay when I grow up." I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes for the first time in a year. "Today, I pay," I said, smoothing his hair. "But one day, you will pay me back, not with money. You will pay me back by never treating the people you love like a walking wallet." As I opened the car door for him, I saw a movement in my peripheral vision across the lot. A man in a delivery driver's uniform was standing next to a beat-up sedan. It was Ethan. He did not wave. He did not try to approach. He just stood there, watching us with a look of profound longing and regret. I did not wave back, but I did not turn away either. I got into the car and started the engine. The revenge was complete. I had won. But as I drove away, leaving my son in the rearview mirror, I knew the hardest part was just beginning learning how to live with the victory without letting it define the rest of my life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a heavy one, but I think it's an important conversation to have. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below so we can see how far our community reaches. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video get discovered by more people who might need to hear it. Stay safe out there.